Hello, and you're very welcome along to the second installment of the Staffroom. The Staffroom is a weekly chat with teachers and educators about stuff that they're doing in their classroom that works, and maybe stuff that doesn't work. In today's Staffroom, we're joined by Demot Walsh. Demot Walsh is a principal in Cornanool National School, and he's going to be telling us about stuff that he's doing in his classroom. We're also joined by Chair of CESI, that's Adrienne Webb. She's going to be keeping us on the straight and narrow, but she's also going to be telling us about a webinar she attended during the week. Finally, we have Reina from Maker Meet Ireland. He gives us some tips and tricks about stuff that you could do in your classroom, but in particular this week, he's talking about how you can make your device wireless. Yep, that's right. Your device can project to your board. I think this is going to be of interest to you. We started off the program by talking to Demot Walsh, and I started by asking him about what he's doing in his classroom.
At the moment, what we've done is we are mostly a kind of a Google school, I suppose, at the moment, or we're certainly using G Suite to a large extent. Obviously, there's been a fair bit of finding our feet in the past 2 weeks as we adapt to some form of remote or distance learning. So I suppose what we've done as regards a kind of a timetable is that we meet online for about an hour each day, and we meet using Google Hangouts. And during that time, then we use it for quite a number of things. Like one of the main things is actually just to check in with the kids, so they can check in with each other, so we can have a bit of a conversation together. They can ask questions, we can answer questions. They get to present maybe bits and pieces that they've been up to while they've been at home. They get to ask each other questions. It's actually fantastic that they've actually learned how to fight as well in the instant message, which has been brilliant. And it's really interesting trying to referee some arguments which come up, which I think is fantastic. I really do, I have to be honest, because you know the kids are adapting very, very quickly to this. Then I suppose what we do is then we kind of set activities for the day. So I run through maybe their mental maths with them. We do some maths using OneNote, and I've got a graphics tablet then as well, so I can write out solutions to problems for them on the board. They can see that on their screen then as well, and then just set them a few tasks or activities for that day, and then we check in again the next morning, maybe at around usually about 10 o'clock. 10 to 11 o'clock. It's simple, if that makes sense, and that's why it's actually working quite well. Kids are very able to use the technology that we are using, essentially, and that's been great because it just makes things very, very simple. It's a very simple way of working, I have to be honest with you, and yeah, it seems to be working fine, if that makes sense. I wouldn't, yeah.
Okay, and what's your timetable like? I mean, are you doing it every day? So are you saying, right, every day at 9 o'clock, and are you doing it from 9 till 12, or are you taking a break during the day?
Yeah, no, so what we have found is working is that we all meet online at 10 o'clock, and we just work through till 11 o'clock.
Okay.
And then we kind of, and the reason for that is that because that gives us the live session, if that makes sense. Outside of that, the kids are using Google Class. They're able to email each other. They're able to email me as well. But it means that we have one designated spot in each day where we can meet online together. And then outside of that, then if they have questions or query, if they have any issues with their work, I'll pick it up either use an email or through comments that they leave on Google Class, for example.
So they're not sitting in front of their computer from 10 o'clock till 2 o'clock. It's not, we have to stop thinking that it's like a classroom. You walk into school, you're in front of your teacher. It's a different construct completely. Same idea, but different construct.
Yes, yeah, I'd agree with that. Yeah, 100%. I find that like an hour is long enough, if that makes sense. Like you often find near the end of the hour that maybe people are tired, maybe people have other bits and pieces that they want to get to. And sometimes what begins with a very good, maybe there's a lot of motivation at about 10 past 10, if that makes sense, after we've talked to each other or made a few presentations. By 11 o'clock, then it starts to get a little bit, not raggedy, but certainly the maybe the enthusiasm has dropped a little bit, if that makes sense.
Yeah, what I like, Dermot, is I like the consistency of it. I like the consistency of, look, it's 10 o'clock every day. It's not very long, it's just the hour, but yeah, we're going to do an hour each day, and then that's it after that, until tomorrow.
Yeah, 100%. Now, they're working away, obviously, outside of that, if that makes sense, and they're submitting their assignments, or they're doing whatever maybe they need to do, for example. But it's obviously very important to be just cognizant that, I suppose the term unprecedented has obviously been bandied about a little bit too much. But, we've got to recognize that the dynamic at home is going to be different for every student that you're working with. And so you've got to find some flow, some form of one size fits all, if that makes sense.
How familiar would the students and yourselves have been with working with the Hangout before? Is it something that they would have done? And how many students I know you're a smallish school, primary school, but how many are we talking about?
Yeah, so I mean, that's a really good point. So in my class at the moment, I have 15 kids. Okay, so that's very diluted in comparison with obviously a class which might have 30 or 32. So we're lucky in that sense that when we log in, there's 16 of us, including me, and there's plenty of time there for people to ask questions and answer questions. There's plenty of space then for each student, but it is a multi-grade as well, Adrienne. So we've got
okay.
So there is a bit of a challenge there, if that makes sense. The other part of your question was,
how familiar are they with using the Hangout? Is it something that was comfortable to them before these last 2 weeks, or is it something new?
So we broke on the Thursday. Thursday was our last day in school, so we actually did a mock Hangout in school on that Thursday.
Okay.
So everybody was somewhat familiar with it. But then obviously when we started again on the following Monday, there was a learning curve for myself, there was a learning curve for the students as well, and we've done a fair bit of just learning as we're going along. Like, we found that there are certain tricks and techniques which work very well. So all cameras are off, which saves on bandwidth, obviously, and we mute all microphones unless you're answering or asking a question. And then the kids will fire away, they'll chat to each other using the chat function in Google Hangouts as well. So yeah, they can fly around there. And then I suppose that one of the best parts about it is that the kids very quickly, they've learned how to use Hangouts themselves. So before we broke, obviously we gave them a set amount of work to cover the first fortnight. And some of it involved doing projects, and they had to collaborate on projects. And what you find is that some of the kids are using Google Hangouts in order to collaborate on maybe a shared Google Slides or a shared Google Doc or something like that. Parents are well aware of this. We've emailed it on just to preempt any kind of major concerns that will happen. But the kids themselves, the kids are doing this for quite a long time. And what I mean by that is, a lot of kids will tell me that they would use, I think there's a Viber conference call that they can do with each other. There's WhatsApp conference calls they can do with each other. Some of them just ring each other when they're doing their homework. So there's this kind of undercurrent there, which maybe I wasn't aware of previously. And they have been doing a lot of this anyways, and they're very comfortable, certainly around technology and certainly around being online with one another. Yeah.
I think that that says a lot about students. If I can show my age, students nowadays, if you know what I mean, that they've adapted that easily to it. And to be fair, Dermot, that's a credit, to yourself in the school. That's just brilliant stuff. It sounds really amazing.
It is, again, and the thing I like about it, Chris, is that I suppose it's a bottom up, if you know what I mean. The kids are driving a lot of this themselves, the kids they're making presentations to each other, they're sending each other links to websites, or maybe was one of the kids that stands out. He's learning a coding language called Lua. This is, I think it's the code behind Roblox, if my understanding is correct.
Yeah.
And so creating games then for the other kids who are playing them, they're giving the kids feedback on it as well. So, you know, they're very well able. Maybe it's just ourselves who have to keep up with them in some cases.
Yeah, quite right.
And what are the pitfalls you're finding? What's the pitfall is the wrong word. What are the pushbacks you're finding?
So what are the pushbacks? So obviously, like everybody else, you know, I'm at home. I've got 2 kids at home, for example. So there's 2 challenges that they presented themselves. You know, like there's been plenty of times, and I've explained it to the kids, and I've said, like, look, there might be times when we're going to get interrupted, because I think sometimes maybe teachers might be a bit iffy about teaching online being interrupted by a child, and maybe there could be a sense of embarrassment there. But you got to get past that. You know, you got to push past that. I've got a 2-year-old, and he's beginning to his interest in potty training is beginning, and during one Google Hangout class, he actually flushed the toilet, you know, and you could actually hear that online. So you just explain to the kids, look, these things will happen where we're in this online situation. And what about? Do you know what I mean? There was another kid, their dog kept jumping into the session. Somebody else had a younger brother, and they're jumping in. So, like, you just have to get on with this, don't we? And what about if people are embarrassed, or what about if people interrupt or anything like that? The biggest, I suppose, the other drawback is there's ways around it, obviously, but you want to keep things simple. Like, is the amount of real-time feedback you can give to the kids, or maybe a lot of the kids wouldn't have means of being able to draw online, if that makes sense. It's probably a better way of articulating that. But like, say, I have a graphics tablet. Some of the kids might have, you know, a touch screen, for example, and they might have a stylus, but other kids don't. And that certainly limits what we can do. You know, if you had everybody with the stylus, then you'd have a shared whiteboard. Everyone would be able to draw on it, which would make things really, really. I think.
Can I? What some of the feedback I'm getting is just because they have a stylus and just because they have a tablet, it doesn't mean they have to use it. Just because they have the technology, it doesn't mean that the technology needs to be involved. Because the act of turning on a hangout between a teacher and student should be technology enough. If the student draws a picture and goes, "This is what I've drawn."
Yes, yeah, I agree with that. I suppose one of the issues there is that you're always concerned about GDPR, Hassan, you know, and like some kids maybe they may have their laptop in their bedroom. Do you know what I mean? And it's just to be cautious around those things. Sometimes you just got to be careful that their camera maybe is, you know, if they're going to show something that the only thing you can see is what they are showing to you. You know, you don't want to see a child's bedroom. You don't want to see somebody's house or somebody's kitchen, for example. And, you know, that's part of the learning curve as well, because
Right.
it is brilliant and it's all good, and it really is all good. You've also got to be cognizant that, you know, things can happen, things can be shown, and there's certain areas there which you've got to be mindful of, if that makes sense.
Sure, and I presume as well students can upload things to Google Drive or to Classroom as well, you know, so in terms of that, as you say, Dermot, there's probably, you know, it's very difficult for students, or perhaps I'm entirely wrong about that, to be more cognizant of where the camera is facing, you know, and what is, you know, look, it's not appropriate to show your bedroom or even your kitchen in your home or whatever. It doesn't really matter, but yeah, it's not you know, and because students don't understand that. Certainly primary, I would have thought wouldn't, you know.
Well, there's learning in that, Chris. You know, there is
Absolutely.
learning in that for the kids, and talking to them about, you know, etiquette, online etiquette, and certainly etiquette during a Google Hangout, for example, and you know, what is acceptable to say maybe during chat or maybe letting things go. And then there's another issue which we found as well, is that when you turn the captions on in Google Hangout, sometimes, and you're all laughing because you know where this is going, but yeah, some of the words get changed and asterisks is maybe replace some of the letters, and what is just a normal word actually becomes what it looks like a word which is maybe inappropriate.
Yeah.
There's one thing you mentioned there, which I was really impressed by one of the teachers in the school who has just begun maybe to embrace using Google Class and is beginning to use Google Hangouts as well. She had a very simple solution which I never thought of, was when she was posting an assignment, she simply wrote it out on a piece of paper, took an image of it, and then just popped that up into the assignment itself. And it was a very quick way, a very simple way of actually making the work available to the kids. Kids went home obviously then, or at home then, the kids obviously followed whatever was in the assignment itself. And then later on, she just put up an image with the sums and the answers with it.
That's exactly the point I was making. Just because we have all these tools of collaborative tools and Google Hangouts and students talking to each other in on Google Docs and that, it doesn't mean we have to use them. Sometimes taking a picture of the handwritten assignment is good enough to get us by. It's a nice workaround.
Yeah, 100%. I mean, obviously there is, I suppose, like from my own kind of studies, my own academic background, you're always cognizant of it not just being transmission, the transmission of learning from maybe a teacher to the student. So I suppose, how can I put it? You're always looking maybe to move on from a transmission perspective to try and look at, can we do something that is more constructivist? Is it possible to maybe go the whole hog and move into a kind of a socio-cultural, kind of a pedagogical approach, and I suppose that's an area that maybe is something I'd love to be able to develop a bit more, Hassan, where we can, we can facilitate the transmission of content very simply. How do we actually improve or enhance that learning then that we're online,
And can I put a question to everybody? One of the, as you may know, I get contacted an awful lot by teachers and the issues that they're having in their Google Classrooms or their 365 OneNotes or whatever. But I got a question during the week and it stopped me in my tracks. And it was, I love the term, it was complex in its simplicity. The teacher turned around and said, how do I know the students are responding? And I kind of went, well, how do you know in your classroom if the students are responding? It's the fact that it's online shouldn't, the two-way communication shouldn't change. It's not a magic barrier. But I walked away from that conversation going, well, maybe I answered that wrong, because the question was, I've put work up, my work is up there, but I'm not getting any feedback. How do I know the students are checking my work? Can I put that to you?
Emma, do you want to take it, given that you're in the context? I know.
Yeah,
I know I would miss the non-verbal interaction that happens in the classroom, and that's where you get a lot of your feedback from. So, there's the hard copy feedback, as it were, and then there's all that raft of non-verbal stuff that goes on that allows a teacher to pick up when there's understanding and not. So maybe Dermot, you could help us out in that and how it's working for you on the ground.
Yeah, so obviously, so one of the things I suppose that I've been very mindful of is that, when we do return to school, I don't want to have about 2 months worth of work to correct. I really don't, but obviously, things like Google Forms, for example, we can assess there very instantly. You can set up a Google form whereby you've got multiple choice questions or true or false questions or whatever number of ways you want to do. That's one form of getting some form of feedback as well. Then, I suppose, and again, just to go back to Google Hangouts, like in the chat function, they would put up emojis, Adrienne, and maybe that's one way of broaching. Yeah, if that makes sense. Like you get smiley faces, or you get. Today it was very funny. One of the children put up a bat, and it was linked back, I suppose, to what their understanding of what began all of this crisis, and it was like, I hate, and then a bat, so I don't know. Does that answer that question, or is that some?
No. I think it does, but I think her question, because she was a second. I should have said this, because she's a secondary school teacher and her students are leaving certs.
Yeah.
The response, I don't think she wasn't getting feedback from her students, but it doesn't mean that the students weren't studying or using her notes or anything like that. It's just that she wasn't getting the feedback, so she automatically assumed that the technology would put a little tick beside Hassan checked that, great, whereas that she wasn't getting that back.
Yeah, I suppose there's there's two definitive cases there, isn't there? As Adrienne says, when you're in a classroom, I think probably the most valuable thing is the feedback that you can, the sighs that you can hear from the students, or the little uncomfortable shifting in a seat when you say something that's difficult, or whatever it is. And that's impossible to replicate online. But certainly then the opposite end of that is that the things that are actually easier to replicate, as Dermot said, are things like Google Forms, where, they fill out the thing, they answer the questions, and you get it back, and there it is done. And in fact, it self-corrects, if anything else, which is a tremendous thing. And I suppose it's trying to meet the former of those two things needs. And I just think that that's very, very difficult. I know for myself, and I'm not, officially in a classroom per se. I'm only in classrooms to do workshops and things for students. But the reality is, like, if I was trying to do a maker workshop online with students, it would be very, very, very difficult, because you need that physical feedback from students, because they're doing a physical thing. And I think that ties very interestingly to what Dermot said about constructivism as well. It's very complicated to have that physical feedback with your students when they're not physically there and they're just online. And I suspect that that's probably something that secondary teachers are going to find easier, and primaries are going to find more complicated, just because of the nature of primary and secondary teaching.
Adrienne, over to yourself. The Teaching Council of Ireland were running some webinars yesterday, is that right?
Yes, they had a new webinar series started, and it was at 12 p.m. yesterday. The title of it is Learning for All. And if you go to the Teaching Council website, that's where you'll find a link. Now, the panel yesterday was made up of Tomás O'Rourke, of course, Director of the Teaching Council. And interestingly enough, we had a guy by the name of Jack Kennedy. He's a fifth-year student from CBS Ennis Timon. Mary-Therese Kilmartin, who's Principal Cloisterbree, the secondary school in Clondalkin. Danielle Connaughty, a home economics teacher in Manorhamilton, who is working in school, which is very much digitally orientated. Michael McNamara of PDST, team leader for digital technologies, and Anya Lynch, the CEO of the National Parents Council Primary. Now, at this point, I'll just say that they had put out a call for anybody to register for it, and in excess of 5,000 people registered for that webinar. So that's saying something about it. 1,000 people was the max for it. So that meant there were 4,000 people who were rather disgruntled about not being watching it live. But in fairness to them, the link is actually up to date to it. So that's a very quick turnaround. And what Tomás guaranteed was that they would actually try and get the platform to take on more going forward. The link for the next one is already up, and that will be on the 21st of April. So it's after the Easter holidays. It's called Unifying the Community, Supporting Each Other from the Local to the National. And I would urge anybody who's interested in going along and registering for that now. The topic really for the discussion yesterday was learning at home from online to offline, and talking about some of the things that we've already dealt with here this evening. But I think the clear message from it was really start simple. Go from what you know. Don't try to do something totally new that you haven't done before this crisis emerged, and suddenly you're, say from a teaching point of view, your teachers are all various locations and you're trying to do something that they haven't even done when they're physically together at all. And again, the point that was made, Hassan made, that if the smaller technology, the simpler technology works for you, then go with it and stick with it. Another point that I found quite interesting was the one that your own school knows its students best. It knows its parents best. The parents have the trust in the school and know how the school works. So don't be looking up or down the road at the school that's doing something totally different. Let your communication be with the school. And the message from the principals were very much, we're here for you. We want to continue that communication. And it was at that point that one of the principals made that certainly in some home situations where perhaps both parents would have lost their jobs, that some of the older students may in fact find themselves being able to pick up jobs and therefore contribute to the family income, and that will become an essential part. So the idea that, and I think Dermot you alluded to as well, home situations are very, very different for everybody, and it's not a one size fits all. And that really you're better off with having a short period of time when you're expecting people to communicate with you, or very set periods. And then people know where they stand. The student himself was interesting because at the very least he was saying about he's a fifth year student. So he's gotten himself a good routine. He doesn't get out of bed till 11 o'clock in the morning, then studies for a couple of hours, then goes out for a good walk or an exercise around the garden, and then comes back and does a bit more, and then has his evening. And I think that's very realistic. Like, if you don't have to be in school, why are you getting up at 7 in the morning to be there? So they've adjusted their time scales. And it was all extremely practical. And there was a plea put out from the primary school representative for the National Parents Council not to forget those students with special educational needs, and that this is a very difficult time both for them, their parents, and that she would like the Teaching Council maybe to address it at a later webinar on it. Useful. It's interesting that it's the topic title they have in it is Learning for All. So it's not just teachers attending this webinar. And it has attracted quite a lot of parents in, I imagine, as well. So it's kind of us all learning together. And some know a lot, some don't know an awful lot, but they want to make the most of what they have. But I think the key things were keep it simple, stay in the environment you're familiar with. If you're going to take one step, make it a small step and make sure it's something that'll work, so that your frustration levels and all your students and your parents' frustration levels don't go through the roof. So yeah, very good and available for anybody now, less than 24 hours later, and you can sign up for the next one on the 21st of April. So good on you, Teaching Council, for getting it up and running. And of course, PDST, just reminding everybody that the multiplicity of resources that they have, as well as skullnet.ie, and there's a lot that's tailored to the Irish environment. And I think somebody mentioned the word mindfulness along the way, that we do need to be mindful, and that there are support websites for that, for not just the big ones, but the little ones and all ages in between.
I think it's important to remember as well that we have to, and I think it's getting there, but just because school normally is 9 o'clock in the morning till 3 o'clock or 2 o'clock in the afternoon or 4 o'clock in the afternoon, doesn't mean that it has to be that now. I think the point was made very well, that if you can get your work done. Now, the arguments for this, pro or against, are for a different day. But if you can get your work done at 11 o'clock and be mindful and still kick a football or do whatever you have to do, I don't see a problem.
No.
And it's about now. I wonder, are leaving certs as laid back at the moment? I really feel for them this year.
No, I should think, yeah.
But you know, I don't know if our young fella that gets up at 11 to do a bit of work, to look after his own headspace, and he kicks a football and then he goes out and then he comes back and he gets the work done. Does that mean that in the future we should be looking at school and the structure of school? I think that's a debate for a different day.
Oh, well, there's a question for another day anyway. But yes, you're right.
But again, I'm not gonna dig. Adrienne, is there anything you want to add to, like, what was you mentioned your takeaways? Was there anything else they could do?
Well, one of the things was that they were part of the webinar was looking for questions from people who were attending. So given that they had 1,000 people attending, and needless to say, I put up a link to our wonderful CESI class or staff room, I would say that they will get a lot of material out of that. And it'll be a question of whether they decide to go for specifics or take a broader brush strokes. I think there's tremendous potential for them to do stuff. And I certainly hope that they will, over the Easter break, when they're taking a step back from, say, that classroom, as we come to know it, that there might not be some work done on specific targeted webinars as well as the more general. As I said, the next one is unifying the community, supporting each other from local to national. So I suppose no more than ourselves, at the start, you have to be quite general and then see where the needs are and move into that space. So I would think that that's what they will be doing as well. But I suspect they have a lot of information from yesterday's webinar on which to build. Sometimes when people start talking technology, you kind of think, oh, they're the nerdy crew and they know everything about everything. And a lot of the time, I mean, you gave the example of, or sorry, Dermot, you gave the example of a colleague who'd used quite a straightforward solution. That there's to be learning done on all levels. And sometimes because you only know how to do a certain amount of things, you actually come up with absolutely ingenious stuff. So asking people to join us is asking you from the full range, because everybody has something to contribute.
Mhm.
Yeah, I definitely. Well said. Well said. I can't add to that. Moving on, we're going to wrap things up. We'll jump over to Chris, Reina, and you're going to talk about Padlet.
I was going to talk about Padlet. Yeah, it's a free online app to use. It's also offline in terms of using it on different devices. It's completely device agnostic. You can use it anywhere. So that anywhere that has a web browser, you can use it in a web browser. And it's just a very good place to keep notes and to collaborate, have students collaborate with each other or have teachers collaborate with their students. You can set permissions so that, let's say, students can or cannot add comments. So it's a very good tool to use. I'll show you one that you set up and then I added to a little bit later on today by just putting information in. And I think it's probably worth noting that we're going to try to put that out to the general public as well for people to look at, for other teachers to look at, add their own questions and notes in the future. We don't have a date for that, but in the future, certainly.
My idea was that every staff room has a notice board, so why doesn't this staff room have a notice board as well? And let that notice board be facing out, so facing teachers and parents. And if you have any questions or anything you want to add, well, then all you have to do is you digitally pin your question to our notice board, which will be forward-facing either on the CESI website at www.cesi.ie, and put your name or not to put your name on it, and we will get back to, we'll see everything that's getting posted there, and we'll get back to it. And if we can answer your questions, we will.
Yeah. That's it, yeah. All right, I'll share my screen here. So hopefully you can see that.
Ooh.
There we go.
You can see it. Good stuff. Okay, great. So yeah, so there's the screen. So basically, it's just padlet.com is the URL that you need to go to. As you can see, just up here, I've just made headings. So there's a primary resource heading. There's a secondary resources, special needs resources, tips and tricks. If I scroll over a little bit, there's screen recording, screen share, coding websites, given that it's Tech Week now. And we could add another heading in if we wish, kind of. I'm sure that there is a theoretical limit, but at the moment, certainly there's only a few that are there. So even in terms of that, it's a top-down system, this particular way. So for instance, this plus right here, someone can come along, click on that plus, it will put a new note in there. Someone can ask a question of that. If, for instance, and this is a coming up to one of the next tips and tricks, which is a DIY visualizer. If teachers want to do something like that, John Haggerty posted something on Twitter, which I thought was excellent, so I just took a note of it. Then other people can come along and add comments to this particular note. So, you know, anybody can come along and just put in good idea, how to use it, and so on, and things like that. And you can see that comments can be added, notes can be changed. When you create a note, you have the option of creating a note by either uploading a file, just putting a URL or a link in, doing a Google web search, uploading or taking a photograph, and then there's a whole list of other things as well, including doodling on an on-screen canvas. And I know, Dermot, you were mentioning something about that for your students there. There's an opportunity that you can do something like that, as well as adding a place or a location, and in fact, linking to another Padlet. There is no account required to do it, but they do recommend, of course, that they'd like you to sign up for an account. But all accounts, the accounts are free, and you get up to 7 of your own individual Padlets for that, so you can do that. So it's just something, and hopefully it'll be a situation there where these will be forward-facing, and these resources, some of them are there now. So as again, Dermot, we were talking about SNA resources and things there. There's the National Council for Special Education ones there, the SESS, and there's one special needs for parents for there. Shamarenga, obviously very, very good, and they all have links up there as well, and there's a lot of resources there already. And when you click on some of these, depending on what you click on, just so you know, it's a very good thing for your students. Let's see if I can find one here. They're all websites now. Where was I going to go to? Ah, yes. So as an example here, we have Google Resources. Yeah, so we have here, for instance, Google Classroom and Edpuzzle that we talked about on the last session of the staff room. If I click on this, which is a YouTube link, you'll see it just opens, not even in a new window. It literally just opens within that window there, and allows you to play. In this particular instance, this is Porrick O'Donnell who put this up, and as you can see, I've just clicked up here. It's his playlist, so I can actually just jump to any of those videos right there that he's put up within that playlist, and they're all about Google Classroom. And it doesn't take you off the Padlet webpage, and you're still there.
That's nice.
It's nice, yeah. And when you're done, you simply click away from it anywhere, and it just puts it away. Okay. Simple as that, yeah. So very nice. So that's just Padlet as a thing, which is a very nice resource. The other one, I'll click into here. So this, again, you can see this opens in window. So again, kudos to John Haggerty for putting this up. As he said, as this person, Dr. Lodge McCammon, put this up, possibly the quickest and easiest way to create a video content visualizer for any sort of online course. So a book on top of a box and their cell phone with an elastic band around the ruler. Can't get any simpler than that, really, to be honest, you know. And that's just a visualizer, you know, very, very simple way. So if you want to share something with your students and you have your mobile phone and you have a laptop, you can use your mobile phone as a visualizer for the laptop. And that is a just a nice little tip and trick. And that brings me into another segue for my last tip and trick very quickly, which is this question was up on the CESI forum, and the question was about how to share my screen from a mobile device to my desktop and or laptop device. There's lots of solutions out there, and I've been looking at some of them in the last week. The easiest one I've found, and I'm sure that I've put that over here. So the easiest one that I have found, we skip over that one here, is called Lonely Screen. It's cross-platform, so Mac, PC, doesn't make any difference, so Windows and or Mac. And as they say, here is one that I prepared earlier. So I'm going to stop that screen share for a moment. And I have another window open here. You should be able to see my screen now.
Yeah.
There you go. Great. So,
Oh, wow.
So this is it. So this is my iPad running in a window. So all that's happened, and I'll quit out of this for the moment. So it's a very small app. I will just launch the app and you'll see what it looks like. So that's it there. So on my device, I go into my screen mirroring and tap on it there. And now you can see it pop up, I hope. So that's it there. And I happen to have an iPad, but it will work similarly on Android devices to Windows, or Android devices to Mac, or iOS devices to Windows as well. So it's entirely cross-platform and agnostic. So the mobile device doesn't make any difference whether it's an Android or an Apple device.
So the safe thing to remember is, as long as your device, your computer, your laptop that you're using now, as long as it can connect and it is connected, then you effectively can connect the iPad, the other tablet, to it and broadcast it that way. So you're linking it to your own device.
Yes, and I'm broadcasting this wirelessly as well. So this is my iPad here.
Yeah.
That's, I'm sure it's pointless. You won't really be able to see it. And clearly I can go to various things and I can look at different things and go in and out, and you can see anything like that. I can go to my different screens, look at the different screens, various things like that as well too. So again, it's just a good way if you're having a session with students and you have something on a particular mobile device. It doesn't even have to be a tablet. It could be your own phone. You can show somebody a second thing to your student as well using a device. Okay, especially if you happen to be at quite a digital school and you know that some students have devices at home as well too. So that's just another option. There are other ones there as well. I'll just jump back here for a moment into screen sharing. So there's another one called Visor, which also works well, and that's cross-platform. And then for anyone who just happens to be very, very nerdy, if you work on any kind of Linux systems, there is something called SCRCPY. Okay, but
Rolls off the tongue.
It just rolls off the tongue. I will warn you. I will absolutely warn you that its command line knowledge is required in order to install it. And the link that I've put up here is on GitHub. But having said all of that, there is a benefit to it, which is that it's extremely quick because it's running from command line.
Yeah.
It's very, very quick. There's almost no latency whatsoever. So those are my tips and tricks for today's session.
Excellent stuff.
We just asked Chris, as a teacher, could you use them? So when I suppose all of this is over, when we're back in the classroom, they could be very easily used in the classroom. Is that fair to say?
Absolutely, yeah, absolutely. So the likes of your Air sharing, the likes of your Apple TV, the likes of your, Google Chromecast, if you have Android devices, this can replace that. So if you have a desktop or a laptop connected to a whiteboard, you install this free piece of software, very low, and you just run the software, and that's it. Now, look, there can always be technical problems depending on how your Wi-Fi is arranged and everything like that. But it is quite easy and quite quick, and it's a free solution. So yeah, it's very good. Yeah. Now, I do suspect the only caveat to that is that if you're in a classroom with students and students have devices, then what will happen, and it's going to happen regardless anyway, unless you have something like an Apple TV with iOS devices, what will happen is you'll find you connect, and then suddenly the students connect and kick you off, and so on and so on and so on. Because the software is very, very basic. There's almost no settings to it, really. Very little settings, yeah.
It's really a bad thing, like, because obviously if you've naturally 14 or 15 laptops, then obviously if there's proper etiquette there, the kids could show what they're doing on the screen very quickly, and as you said, places Chromecast or
absolutely, yeah. And again, it's a free piece of software. The other thing that happens to be really nice, which I didn't show, is that there is, and look, I suppose I may as well just very quickly. I will just pop here to there again. So in this window as well, at the very bottom, there's just a tiny little arrow just down here in the very bottom right-hand side. And that just gives you access to a big, large red record button. So that means anything that you're doing, you can actually record that, and it saves it as an MP4 file. So you can actually, let's say you could pre-record something on your mobile device and then send that up to Google Classroom for the students, or something along those lines, whatever it might be. Yeah, so you can do that as well too. And again, this is all bundled in a free piece of software. So, again, and it's very quick, very easy to download, etc., etc., etc. So if you don't like it, just simply delete it. It's not, you haven't lost anything. It's part of a small bit of time.
Thanks very much, Chris.
No worries.
And of course, if you have anything you want us to demonstrate or give a run through of, or you want Chris to run through for you, let us know, and he'll be more than happy to do the demonstration here. Or if it's a longer form demonstration, we have no problem at all in getting Chris to, he's cheap, like, we'll get him to do the demonstration, and then we'll put it somewhere else on the CESI website, or we'll share it on the CESI list. Now, we managed to get through the entire staff room meeting without mentioning what we're about. So www.cesi.ie is the Computers and Education Society of Ireland. Adrienne Webb is the chair of CESI. Part of CESI is something we fondly call the CESI list. And the CESI list is between 1,500 and 2,000 teachers. And it's collaboration in its most stripped back form. A question goes up and you have 1,500 heads thinking about that question and a few heads answering that question for you. So if you're a teacher, you're in education, you're an SNA, do you know what? If you're a parent and you have a question, let us know. You can find us on www.cesi.ie. Go to the CESI forum. If you're a teacher, you can register. If you're on Twitter and you're a parent and you want to ask us here in the staff room any questions, please feel free. @CESI tweets on Twitter will get us. Also, email gets us as well. If it goes to the CESI website, it is at one stage, or it is one way or another, it's going to get to us. So please, we'd love to hear from you. The staff room is all about the chats, what you're doing in your classroom, what you'd like to do in your classroom, but you can't, or you don't have the expertise, or you don't have maybe the confidence to do it. We want to hear from you. And something we spoke about at the start of our staff room meeting was, if this isn't working for you, because we're all great about this is all working and yay, myself and Chris are in nerd heaven and Dermot's doing amazing Google stuff down there, and Adrienne is going to webinars, and we're in our element. If you're not in your element, we want to hear from you. We want to hear what the pitfalls you're encountering are, because we want to be able to support you. Because again, what we mentioned during our meeting was that sometimes the simplest solutions are the ones that work. And the technology is only meant to be a bridge between you and your student. If we start relying or over-relying on the technology to do stuff for us, in my humble opinion, then I think we're going a bit wrong. I think we should be using the technology to bridge that gap. And once the gap is bridged, anything else that the technology can add, happy days. Okie doke, that's it for now. I'm going to hit the record button because
you haven't been recording this whole time.
Can you imagine? I'm going to leave all that in because I just want to point out the fact that time constraints are important. But time constraints are super important to me because my son is going to bed and it's now 8:30 at night and his bedroom is just over there. And he doesn't want to be hearing me rabbiting on, talking to the computer again. So
Oh,
that's all we have time for today. Don't forget the staff room is going to be broadcast weekly online. If you have any questions, at CESI Tweets is how you get a hold of us. Or indeed, you can go to the CESI website. The CESI website is www.cesi.ie. There's an online forum there. If you're a teacher, join. And if you have any questions, please feel free to direct them to us. One way or another, we'll get them. So until we talk to you again, I'm Hassan Daba. Take it easy.